Hi there, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is. As always, happy whatever day it is. This is Left Side of the Aisle. I'm your host. My name's Larry Erickson. And for the next almost half hour, I'm going to be talking about some things that I hope you will find interest in. If you do have any reactions to the show, you can email them to me directly. My personal email is whoviating, WHOVIATING at AOL.com. Or you can go to my website, which is called Lotus Surviving a Dark Time, and the URL will be here several times during the show. You can go there, leave a comment there if you'd like, or you can get the email from there if you missed it. If you do send me email, however, just two requests, as always. One, include something in the subject line to make it clear this is about the show, it's not spam, and be a little patient about getting an answer because I just am lousy with email. So, you will get an answer, by the way. You can count on that. All right, so as always, whenever we can, we like to start here with some good news. So we got a couple of things here. The first, though, we have to say that despite their name, right-to-work laws have nothing to do with actually having a right to work. That is, a right to a job sufficient to provide for you and, if you have one, your family. Instead, they are state laws, and in some cases state constitutional amendments, that declare that unions cannot require workers in a unionized workplace to join the union or to pay union fees or to have to pay some other sort of fee towards the union. But at the same time, these same laws require that these unions have to cover these non-members and these non-paying people in their contract negotiations. And so they're covered by the benefits achieved by the union contract. In other words, they have to represent these people for free. Now, such laws or constitutional provisions exist in 26 states in the United States, and they are widely and quite correctly seen as attempts to undermine the union by draining its coffers, draining its money, and to, if possible, get rid of them so we can go back to the good old days of the 19-teens. Now, right-wingers defend right-to-work laws on the grounds that, as one of them said, and I'm quoting here, no one should be forced to join a union or pay union dues as a condition of employment. But the thing is, what they're really saying is then that these people should be able to have the higher pay that union contracts bring, the improved working conditions that contracts bring, should get for them the paid vacation, the paid sick time, the paid holidays. They should be able to get all the benefits of the union without having to do anything or contribute anything toward obtaining those benefits. In other words, they should be getting free stuff, which in a slightly different context, these same right-wingers would be labeling these same people as welfare cheats. Anyway, getting to the news. When he came into office, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walk-All-Over-You insisted that he had no interest in establishing a right-to-work law in Wisconsin. He was, of course, lying through his teeth, and in March of 2015, Wisconsin became a right-to-work state. The law was challenged. And the good news here is that on April 4th, a state court struck down this law as violating the Wisconsin state constitution on the grounds that it was an illegal taking of union property without compensation, since now, unlike before, they would have to represent these people for free. The downside of this was that this was a county circuit court decision, which is subject to appeal, and thanks to Walk-All-Over-You's, by, I have to admit, some clever politics, having pretty much packed the Supreme Court with cronies, the future of this does not look bright. But for now, I will still call this good news. I will still call it a win for the rights of labor and of working men and women. And I will still say it's good news because it has pushed the foul welfare for the bosses issue of right-to-work laws back into the public news. All right, next up on the good news topic is something that has gotten some attention recently. It's the issue of what are known as corporate tax inversions. Now, in a tax inversion, a U.S. corporation merges with or more commonly buys out a smaller foreign firm, but the deal is portrayed as the bigger U.S. firm being taken over by the foreign firm, and the foreign company's address becomes the corporate address. So what had been a U.S. firm is now being described as a subsidiary of a foreign firm that can lower its tax rates by internal borrowing and can more easily move profits around the world in order to avoid paying U.S. taxes. In short, it's a scam. It's a legal scam, but it's still a scam. All right, on April 4th, credit where credit is due, the Obama administration's Treasury Department released its third and most far-reaching set of rules in order to combat and regulate corporate inversions. Now, corporations and their lawyers, for the most part, pretty much shrugged off the first two sets of rules as inconsequential. But these rules are being called unexpectedly aggressive, and they're being taken very seriously. In fact, after these rules were announced, the very next day, the amazing Mr. O called on Congress to pass legislation to really limit corporate tax loopholes and to limit tax inversions, which he called one of the most insidious loopholes out there. The new regulations target serial inverters. These are companies that have grown bigger by a series of inversions, and they make it harder to engage in what's called earnings strippings, where U.S.-based profits are shifted on the books to some other country in order to, again, avoid U.S. taxes. Coppers are quick to denounce the move. In fact, one Representative Charles Bostany said this proposal will do little to stop actual inversions. Which proved to be a very interesting comment because, you see, two major pharmaceutical companies, Pfizer and Allergan, have been working on a $160 billion merger, which would have created an Irish company, even though Pfizer would continue to operate out of New York City, and Allergan, a product of multiple inversions whose corporate address is in Dublin, actually has its offices in Parsippany, New Jersey. The merger was to be the biggest tax inversion deal ever, and it was going to dodge an estimated $32 billion in U.S. taxes over some years. But just 2 days after the new rules were announced, the deal was canceled. Sometimes it just works out. All right, our third good news entry for the week comes from a place where we need more such good news: the streets. Streets filled with demonstrators. On April 2nd, 150 people set out from Philadelphia to march to Washington, D.C., about 140 miles away. They were part of an action called Democracy Spring, where a coalition of over 100 organizations together demand legislation to restore the voting power of ordinary citizens by means such as ending the influence of big money in our political system, restoring the Voting Rights Act, getting rid of superdelegates in the presidential primary process, and clamping down on things like gerrymandering and voter ID laws, which are simply tools of voter suppression against the poor, minorities, elderly, and the students for the most part. On Monday, April 11th, hundreds of people marched through Washington, D.C. to the Capitol. Media accounts put the crowd at about 600, but based on the video that I saw of this, that seemed to me to be an undercount of at least a few hundred people. But at the Capitol, 400 people sat down on the Capitol steps, refusing to leave, and were arrested in the first of what is planned to be a series of nonviolent civil disobedience actions at the Capitol through this week. Police, badly underestimating the expected crowd, initially brought just a single bus to Capitol Plaza to carry the protesters away. The action continued on Tuesday with 85 people, all of them seniors, this was senior day, cheerfully arrested. Now, I'm doing this show on Wednesday. I don't know what happened today. But I do know that over 3,500 people from 33 states have pledged to take part in the Capitol protest at some point this week, doing this to protest the slow erosion of our democracy. This would make this one of the biggest nonviolent civil disobedience demonstrations of recent years. And I say we need a lot more good news of that sort. All right, next up, an update to an update. Last week, I talked about something involving civil asset forfeiture and equitable sharing. Now, just a quick reminder. Civil asset forfeiture is a program under which police can seize your property based on nothing but their belief that it was used in or gained through illegal drug activity. Equitable sharing is a federal program under which cooperating local police can keep as much as 80% of the assets, the value of the assets seized in such a program, which enables local police departments to do an end run around their own state laws, which often say they can keep a smaller portion of the proceeds, and in many cases say they can't keep any of it, that the value of any asset seized goes into the general state fund. Now, equitable sharing had largely been dropped, mostly cut back in January. Last week, I brought the bad news that it had been reinstated. As I said, equitable sharing is a corrupt outgrowth of the whole corrupt regime of civil asset forfeiture, which itself is an outgrowth of the corrupt and failed war on drugs. Here, what I want to do is give you one example of what this sort of corruption looks like. Willow Springs is a suburb of Chicago. Its police department has obtained money through equitable sharing. The money in these cases is supposed to be used for enhancing law enforcement operations, quote unquote. But according to a new audit conducted by the Department of Justice and released about 2 weeks ago, the police and Willow Springs have spent just under $1 million on things that do not meet that standard, including, for example, 13 vehicles, including 2 chromed-up, tricked-out Harleys, a Chevy Camaro, a Ford F-250, and a 26-foot boat, all of which have been used rarely. The police department even bought what the town of Willow Springs itself called a fully loaded Ford Expedition SUV for a former police chief. Now, this is just another example, and in fact there are many, of how equitable sharing and the whole practice of civil asset forfeiture acts as an incentive for police departments to take first and ask questions later. Because the thing is, the money from equitable sharing comes from a federal government program. There is no requirement for these police departments to justify any expenditures they make with it to local authorities or to the public. There is no oversight. The only oversight comes from a possible Justice Department audit, which may not even happen until years after the fact. And the thing is, the issue of civil asset forfeiture actually goes even beyond this. It goes beyond this. It goes beyond police departments. Prosecutors will often resort to seizing the property of people accused of crimes. Not convicted, mind you, merely accused, and so much for innocent until proven guilty. Consider the case of Celia Luis. She was accused by the feds of Medicare and banking fraud. When they indicted her, she had $2 million in assets left. And prosecutors, deciding those assets might be needed for restitution, seized everything she had, including assets that the prosecution itself admitted are not connected to the accused crimes, to the alleged crimes. She challenged the seizure, saying that that she needed what were called the untainted assets in order to hire attorneys for her defense. Now, happily, in a rare, even if tiny, dent in the regime of asset seizure, the Supreme Court ruled 5-3 at the end of March that seizing the untainted assets was a violation of Luis's Sixth Amendment right to counsel of her choice. And so the seizure could not be allowed because, in the words of Justice Stephen Breyer, the untainted property, quote, belongs to the defendant pure and simple, unquote. Now, this is a very narrow victory since it only seems to apply to assets which even the prosecution admits are unrelated to the alleged crime and which are needed for a defense, but still it's a victory. It indicates that there is a line that the government can't cross, even if that line is pretty far away. By the way, the 3 dissenters in the case were Anthony Kennedy, Sam Alito, and Elena Kagan, all of whom seem to think that the government stripping a defendant of the means they would need to defend themselves is just Jim Dandy. All right, now it's time for one of our regular weekly features. It's the Clown Award, given as always for meritorious stupidity. Our runaway winner this week is a man who, having proved you could be a crybaby and a bully at the same time. It is Florida Governor Rick Scott, or as we know him around here, Voldemort. You may have heard or even seen the video of a woman launching a tirade against Voldemort at a Starbucks in Gainesville, Florida, berating him for not doing enough to help people and for a failure to create good jobs, which our clown tried rather feebly to rebuff before he scurried out. Kara Jennings, the woman in the video, actually had nothing to do with the video. Someone else took it, someone else posted it, but it went viral with over 2 million views. So, okay, another viral video, something that in a few days, maybe a few more, would be filed away with all of the rest of the now forgotten viral videos. But that couldn't be allowed. Voldemort had been embarrassed. His Majesty had been affronted, and this could not go unpunished, not after he had to run home crying. So, a video hit piece on Kara Jennings quickly appeared. The clear result of some Oppo research, the video claims that, gasp, she has described herself as an anarchist, and gasp, gasp, she refused to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Oh, woe is us. It also says that she is a former government official, which she was, having served on her hometown city commission for 4 years, which admittedly is kind of odd for a self-described anarchist. But the point is, the video creepily uses the term former government official as if it was a bad thing that she had served in local government. More to the point, the video calls Jennings a latte liberal who is sitting around coffee shops, demanding public assistance, surfing the internet, and cursing at customers who come in. Now, Jennings is not on public assistance, although, as she pointed out herself later, it shouldn't matter if she was. She was actually working on a freelance project for the Service Employees International Union, the SEIU at the time, and the only target of any impolite language was Voldemort himself. But the real point here is that this video was done, created, prepared by Voldemort's Political Action Committee and put up on his official YouTube channel. There is no way on Earth, or on any Earth, in fact, that he can claim that he's not directly responsible for this. So the governor of Florida is using the resources of his political campaign machine to launch a very personal attack on an individual private citizen because she had the utter gall to mouth off to him in a Starbucks. Governor Rick Voldemort Scott, who, just like his movie namesake, tries to appear powerful, but in the end is revealed to just be a pathetic little clown. And we are taking a break. Hi there, and we're back, and we're going to follow up on our Clown Award with like a special edition Clown Award, because I couldn't let this one slip by. Special edition Clown Award for tone-deaf boneheadedness. And the recipients of the dishonor are Hillary Clinton and New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio, and if you know what I'm talking about, you know why. But in case you don't, here's the deal. Saturday, April 9th, Clinton and de Blasio took part in a skit as part of the Inner Circle Dinner, an annual New York City entertainment show for local politicians, reporters, and other insiders. And just parenthetically, that very phrase, politicians, reporters, and other insiders, tells you an awful lot about what's wrong with our political reporting these days, but leave that aside for now. Anyway, they took part in this skit. Right, first off, Hill and Bill don't quit the day jobs. But the real point here is that the skit has her saying to him, "Thanks for the endorsement, it took you long enough," to which he responds, "Sorry, Hillary, I was running on CP time." Now, CP time stands for colored people time, and it's based on the racist idea that African Americans are always late for appointments because they're either too slow or too lazy to get there on time. Some gasps from the audience and someone shouting "no" were clearly audible on the NBC News video of the event. Now, at that point, the third person on stage, actor Leslie Odom Jr., said, "I don't like jokes like that," prompting Clinton to say, "Oh, cautious politician time." which was apparently intended to be the scripted punchline that would save the skit. It didn't. It was crude, racially insensitive at best, and stunning in its, yes, tone-deaf boneheadedness. I can only imagine the outrage level of cries of racism that her supporters would be mounting if Bernie Sanders did the same thing. Now, I am sure that neither Hillary Clinton nor Bill de Blasio are racist, but I am equally sure that at that moment, the two of them were both total bozos. All right, now for our other regular weekly feature. This is the Outrage of the Week. It is going to take a little background. A couple of times over the last 5 years or so, I have written about the recurring attempts to undermine and ultimately do away with the United States Postal Service. We have had seen repeated waves of claims that the USPS was on the brink of financial collapse, of fiscal disaster, of crushing bankruptcy. It was on the edge, the precipice, and on and on and on. And nearly 5 years ago, in fact, the New York Times was telling us that, quote, the United States Postal Service has long lived on the financial edge, but it has never been as close to the precipice as it is today. In the years since, the drumbeat of impending doom and disaster has gotten both softer and louder, but it has never actually gone away. Now, you might be forgiven if you wonder how it is that year after year after year, the agency can be on the brink of bankruptcy, the precipice, without ever actually falling into the abyss. But that doesn't matter to the true believers in imminent catastrophe, or more to the point, it doesn't faze those who want to bring on that catastrophe in order to do away with the Postal Service, turning the job over to private profit-making corporations, while at the same time breaking the largest and one of the most powerful unions in the United States, that of the postal workers. Thing is, let's face some facts here, okay? Mail is a bargain. You can send a 1-ounce letter, that's usually about 3 sheets of paper, that's like a 6-page document. You can have delivered anywhere in the U.S. You can send it from Key West to Point Barrow for 49 cents, which otherwise would maybe get you half a candy bar. And when I say anywhere, I do mean anywhere. The United States Postal Service is legally required to provide universal service, and it makes deliveries to about 151 million individual addresses every week. It has to make mail service available everywhere. Now, you may have to travel a bit to get to a post office, or you may have to travel a bit to get to, the line of mailboxes at the end of some country byway, but it has to be available to you. Even if you're way out in the country, even if you live in a neighborhood that's regarded as so dangerous that the taxi service won't go there, the mail still has to. That's a requirement which simply does not apply to the private competitors like FedEx and UPS. They don't have to do that. They think you're just too far out or too inconvenient or too risky or in any way not profitable enough. They just don't do it. Now, at the same time, the thing is, the Postal Service is in a truly weird situation. It's a quasi-governmental organization, quasi-governmental body, run independently, but still subject to legal restrictions laid down to it by Congress, even though it receives no federal money at all, no taxpayer money at all. It is entirely funded through the sale of postage and postal services. Despite contributing not a penny to its support, Congress has a huge say in how the USPS is operated. For example, in 2006, Congress passed one of those wonderfully misnamed bills, the Postal Accountability Enhancement Act, which, among other things, it mandated that within 10 years, that is by 2016, the Postal Service Fund fully fund retiree health benefits for future retirees out to 75 years in the future. That is, Congress is requiring of the USPS that within 10 years it have enough money set aside to fully fund health care benefits for retirees who hadn't even been born yet. This is a requirement, a task taken on, a burden held by no other agency, no other corporation, no other organization in or out of any level of government anywhere in the United States. And it's costing the USPS about $5.5 billion a year, an amount significantly larger than the annual deficit that we're told has it perpetually on the edge of collapse. Despite all that, the Postal Service has not only managed to survive, things are actually looking a little brighter. In February, the USPS is able to report that in the first quarter of fiscal year 2016, it posted a net income of $307 million, a reversal from a string of losses. Which is what brings us to the outrage of the week. Something else Congress did a while back was to ban the agency from being able to raise the cost of postage above that of the Consumer Price Index, that is the inflation rate. 2 years ago, the Postal Regulatory Commission allowed a temporary hike above that limit, which raised the price of a stamp to 49 cents. On April 10th, the price of a stamp dropped back to 47 cents, a 2-cent drop, which to us as individuals means essentially nothing, but will represent a $2 billion annual loss to the Postal Service. Just at the moment the Postal Service might be beginning to see a glimmer of daylight amidst the surrounding darkness, this is the moment that the Postal Regulatory Commission dealt the agency a $2 billion blow by its failure or perhaps unwillingness to extend the hike. The U.S. Postal Service has been repeatedly ranked number one in overall service performance of the postal services in the 20 wealthiest nations. It's been named the most trusted agency in government 6 years in a row, and it's been ranked the 6th most trusted business in the nation. The USPS is proof that even under ridiculous handicaps, government programs can work and can work well, and has shown that a strongly unionized workforce can provide for its members while still maintaining a high level of service. And those two facts have given a whole panoply of reactionaries more than enough reason to try to make it fail. Now, I don't know if the Postal Regulatory Commission's action is as part of that, or just the effort of callous and boneheaded indifference to the impact. I do know that it's an outrage. All right, my last 2 minutes, I want to take very quickly some observations, something I haven't talked about in a while. I said in the wake of the Supreme Court decision recognizing the right of same-sex marriage that the fight was by no means over. The dead-enders against recognition of the rights or even the reality of the existence of LGBTQ people were not about to give up their bigotry so easily. The backlash has come, mostly from the expected quarters and expected places, and always on the expected basis: religion. I believe that my God, who is of course the only true God, said such and such, therefore I am freed from all civil, ethical, and legal obligations to deal with anything or deal with anyone that I find icky. Now, the specific claims of First Amendment protections for bigotry are relatively new, arising only after other people, successfully were able to win the recognition of their own rights. But the appeal to God, to religion as a basis for bigotry is not new. Now it's being directed most against LGBTQ people, against transgender in particular. But before that, it was used, and it's still being used, about abortion and birth control. Before that, it was segregation. Before that, it was slavery. There's nothing new about using religion as a weapon of bigotry. In recent months, we have seen states consider or even pass legislation to restrict the right of LGBTQ people. But in the face of that backlash, there was light. The opposition to the bill that was passed by the Georgia legislature was so fierce that the governor, Nathan Deal, he vetoed it. North Carolina has also passed a law, the reaction to which has been so fierce that within days, Governor Pat McCrory was issuing a clarification in order to try to deflect the criticism. The point of going through all this is simply this. Recent events have made it clear that we still have a very long way to go on the matters of sexual and gender equality. But those recent events have also made clear that we also are not willing to go back. I started with good news. I suppose I'm ending with good news as well. You have the best week you possibly can. We will see you next week. Peace.